5 o'clock. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Steve. This meeting is actually a planning meeting to go over and discuss.
Excuse me? We worked on Untitled Chapter.
And get a presentation from Mr. John Tappan relative to the financial planning tool. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Tappan. I do not know if there's a schedule for people to arrive to provide their input, or if it's just catch as catch can. So if it's catch as catch can, we caught our first one. That's Steve Bullock. Hello, Steve.
Yeah, it's not right. Yeah.
Attaboy.
Did this work? Yeah. This is actually. No, this is not actually.
Steve, one of your new guys is like a front guard for New England Patriots or something.
Yeah.
Big guy.
See,
Strong,
to make sure we do the different ones.
really, really strong.
Mhm.
And this is, that's HDMI and that's this playboard.
It's got a little wireless transfer.
No, that's not, oh, so, best case you can do is VGA.
Yeah, oh, here we go.
It's VGA. So, just as a technical thing, we need a converter that goes from HDMI to DisplayPort. The video on that computer is DisplayPort, not HDMI.
So I can't see the bottom of the screen there to get it started.
Oh, should we take this down more?
Yeah, I could not figure out how to get it to stay this afternoon, and I asked Bill Stevens, and he didn't know how to do it either.
All right.
Ooh, that's worse.
Yeah.
Sometimes it stays, but it doesn't stay all the way down.
Should I just stand here and hold
Can
on?
we tie it down to something?
Tie it to a chair.
No, that's a good idea.
There we go.
I'm gonna go sit over there so I can see better.
Okay.
You still can't see it though, can you? Oh, there you go.
What can't you see? You mean there's more of a down
Yeah.
here?
Just nobody's clicking on that. Now that we're, now he's up, it's good.
I'm up where I can see.
Oh, okay.
This thing needs to be
I'll wait for the chair to go up in the
That's
air.
kind of what I was worried about.
Heavier chairs.
Don't you just love it when the plan comes together? Oh, yeah, okay.
He's got what he needs, so
Is it
let's
really
just,
picking that?
Yeah, just keeping it down all then.
yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
He's good, because he's got his thing, that's
Okay.
fine. No, thank you.
Thanks.
Oops.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
Both of them, or just one?
That one's off the top. Is it? There we go. Sorry, there's something else I'm looking for here. Okay. And so they have this aimed off the top of the screen. So you have to guess where things are up there. PT. So the first thing I wanted to show you, because it comes up, is what are we going to use for expected income or interest on the public money that we've deposited. And the red dot here is the center of the federal funds target rate. That's the rate set by the Federal Open Market Committee. The black is what's happened to the New Hampshire Public Deposit Investment Pool over the past little over 2 years. And the blue is what's happened with the money that the trustees of trust funds have invested. So you can see that 2 years ago we were up near 2.5%, and right now we're down to just a little under 0.9, and that's the basis for the number that I use in the spreadsheet for what we expect. The other thing to look at is we're going to be talking about the cost of building construction.
Excuse me. Oh,
Yeah.
what's the scale? Back on that chart, what was the scale this way? Years?
Yes, this is a fiscal year,
Yeah,
so each of these small squares is 2 months.
yeah.
So this is, here's the fiscal year we're in now, fiscal year 2022. This is the past fiscal year that we just closed out in June, and this is the previous year.
Okay.
You can see that interest rates were tumbling before COVID hit.
Yeah.
And when COVID hit, they really started going down. And the investment pool has been pegged at 2 points, 0.02, for almost a year. And because we have most of our money in certificates of deposit, we're holding on, coming down more slowly. And of course, the trick for us is to make sure that when interest rates do start going up, we don't get stuck down here. So right now we have, our average weighted maturity is much shorter than it's been, and we have a much greater fraction of the money in demand deposits compared to in the past, what we've had in the past. In the past, we've had sometimes approaching 97% in time deposits and just 3-point-something% in demand deposits. And right now, we have probably approaching 35% in demand deposits. So those are insured cash sweeps, so money markets that where the interest rates will go up. As rates start to recover, they would go up soon. And if there are good opportunities, we'd then be able to put money into other things. The other thing we're going to talk about, because buildings costs, is this is the Turner Building Cost Index. This is for non-residential, and this is the delivered cost. So this is not the cost to build the building. This was tied to the cost that the buyer would pay to have the building built. And you can see historically it's tended to run around 5%. When we had the crash in 2008, it went down. When COVID hit, it went down, and it's coming back up. The red is the annual change. The green is the quarterly change, the change over 1 quarter. And this yellow-orange is the annualized quarterly. So if you took what their rate was for a quarter, if that was compounded over a full year, you can see the most recent quarter went up quite a bit, over 1.25%. So compounded over a year, that would be a 5%. So that's one of the inputs into town buildings is when you're looking ahead, what annual cost increase do you want to use? And it's important to realize that that annual cost increase is not just inflation. It's inflation plus real cost increase plus quality cost increase or feature cost increase. So the financial planning tool we're looking at right now is version 0.03. So it's still a draft version starting with 0. And the most recent changes were department inputs. I also added police equipment page, but it's outside of the summation, so it's not being summed in with everything else. For that, I added a feature where you could put in an A for costs that would come from the annual budget rather than from a reserve fund. And down on this page, in version 0.03, you can see what has been updated, or what I got updates from, and what I didn't. And this just shows what was updated. It does not necessarily mean that these are complete, and especially when we get to talk about town buildings. I met with Steve even just today, and most of the new information he gave me I got in, but not all of it. So it is a work in progress. Beginning of year balance. This is where you put in this interest rate to be used for the current year. I think the 0.85 is conservative. I think well, right now we're better than that. And I think we'll stay above 0.85 for the rest of the year, but at the end of the year, we have some really good certificates maturing, and we're nowhere close to being able to match the rates we've been getting in the past. And then this interest rate is what's used for future fiscal years, not just the current. And my recommendation is that number there should be kept fairly conservative. This is a place where if you want to, we won't take the time now, but this shows the total to be put into each of the funds, or rather the total for all the funds. And you can go and play with these numbers and see that really these numbers don't make much of a difference. It isn't like the days when you had high inflation and interest was at 10% or something. The next page is just the start sum. This is just a blank page, which is the start of all of the worksheets that will be summed. So every worksheet that's going to be summed into the total of all the appropriations to reserve funds has to be between the start sum and the end sum. And that's where I was able to put in another worksheet for police equipment, but it doesn't get added into everything because it's not in between start sum and end sum. And now town buildings. So right now on this projector, you're looking at it at its native resolution, which is a 1280 by 800. So these were sent out. Steve made quite a number of updates. This is something that we are still working on. I want to emphasize again, it's a work in progress. And also, as the Public Works Director, 3/4 of the unique line items in this whole spreadsheet are Public Works. So 3/4 of the work to do these inputs falls to Steve. And it means that his work is 3 times as much as all the others put together. There were things we talked about today that he's still working on. There were some things he gave me that I'm still working on and are not in here. This shows that, so the planned deposits, what we actually put in this year was 104,500. And with everything that's listed here, next year you would need to put in 632,000.
Is that just for that year, or is that to finish everything that's on here?
So this goes out, 632,000, that continues out through.
So every year you'd have to put that in?
Yes. So if the amount to be, the calculated required deposit is the same as the previous year, then it just shows in the light gray.
Okay.
So the black ones are where it changes. So in 2030 is where it goes way down. And that's because,
We haven't added things.
Hmm?
We haven't added things for 2030, so.
correct, most of the stuff that's in here is before, within the original 9 years for the lease of the office building. And I think that when we are usually working on this, we would take these three columns and you would hide them. You'd have more working room over here, but you still see the grade, the letter grade for what type of estimate it was. That's an A through E. And you still see the number for the age of the estimate. So a 1 it's an estimate that was 1 year old. So it's an estimate from fiscal year 2021. And some of them, the pound symbol is because that's an estimate from 2010. So it's 12 years old and 2 digits doesn't fit. And these are also color coded. So a 0 is in the nice dark green, and then it goes on down to higher numbers go into the red. And same thing over here with the A, B, C, D, E, from the green on down into the red. And let me bring these back. So the inputs that Steve has made, or changes, are what is the estimated cost, what kind of estimate is it? That's these grades A through E. These are a pull down where you pick A is a competitive bid all the way down to E was a plain guess. And what is the date of the estimate? These are in fiscal years. And then for some of them, there's a link. So this one for the fire suppression system, there's a link. And you can call up the minutes of the 2010 town meeting when it came to the floor as a $50,000, is it down here? Came to the floor as $50,000 for the sprinkler system. And then that was changed immediately to 288,000, with the expectation that 93% of the cost would come from a grant, and the town would only have to pay 20,000. Of course, that didn't come to fruition, and there is no sprinkler system in this building. But that 288,000 number, that's the number that we're using now, but it is from 2010, so it has been updated by compounded annual cost increase to fiscal year 2022. I did speak with the fire chief about this, and we really don't feel that at this point, where it's not clear that we have the money to expend on this, it didn't seem reasonable to actually try to get real quotes. I think maybe the next step might be that you ask a company for a rough budgeting number, and maybe they can tell you, well, we did this building that was 25,000 square feet and it cost this, and this other building that was 12,000 cost this, so you can then make a guess from that.
Just for the record, I've asked twice to get a price on a fire suppression system, not a sprinkler system, to compare the two?
We're just calling it an automatic sprinkler system. The actual method of what is it, whether it's sprinkler or water mist or whatever, that's the next step down the road. Anything else other than sprinkler is gonna be even more expensive.
We don't know that.
Like fire suppression, like foam.
Fire suppression is a foam system. It is used worldwide, especially in large buildings that have bays, et cetera. And it is much more efficient rather than a sprinkler system, which will put out a fire depending on the type, but it will also create a lot of damage over the long term.
Here it is called a fire suppression system.
Yeah,
The only thing we need to be concerned about, Carrie, is the foam system has PFAS in it, and that's
I'm sorry?
has PFAS in it,
Yeah,
in that foam.
What about
it's
it?
hazardous.
It's hazardous.
So who cleans that up? What do you do
No,
with that?
I'm sorry, I don't agree with that at all. I've dealt with a foam system on some of the most expensive, sitting in a hangar down where you work.
Yep, and they
Has
have
a foam
PFAS
suppression
issues. They
system.
have PFAS issues
I
down there.
do.
Big PFAS issue.
Okay.
It's just something to consider. I don't know, maybe they've come out with foam systems that don't have it, but the traditional ones have that particular issue in it.
All right.
So you can see that we have some of these links filled in, but not all of them. Some of them are very simple, and Steve has some of these quotes and other work from which these numbers are derived. And that's something we're gonna be continuing to work on, is get those references in. There's a place, a column over here, where right now you can put it in A, B, or an X. X indicates, A indicates that it would come from the annual budget, B that it would come from a bond. Bonds are only available on this worksheet for town buildings. Or X indicates it's not funded or no funding is planned. And that, these allow you to, particularly the X, allow you to keep an item on the list even though at the top, right now, you cannot see a way of funding it. And so therefore, you're not gonna plan to save for it, but it shouldn't be taken off the list unless it's something that you really would not accept even if it was given to you. It's something that's obsolete, or it just doesn't make any sense for the town anymore. Because otherwise, if you take things off the list that you can't pay for now, then next year, when something else gets added to the list, it doesn't have those previous year's items to fight against for funding. And that means that next year you might add something to the list that really isn't as worthy as the thing that you took off last year. So, the other thing is that up here is a place where you can put in cost overrides. So if you say that next year, assuming you leave all these things on the list and you don't X any of them out, this calculates that you have to put in $632,000 next year. If you say, no, we're not gonna do that, we're gonna put in 400,000. It says, okay, it's now 400,000 that you're putting in, and now the year after and all those rest of the years, instead of putting in 632, you gotta put in 672. So, I think this override is actually something you would use always, every year on every one of these, just because you're not going to put out a warrant article for a number with 6 significant digits. You're not going to say $632,219. So I think you're always going to just round it off. even if you are essentially appropriating the full amount.
So do we get started?
So,
I hear somebody chomping at the bit.
Well, I want to figure out what our plan is.
So the other thing is this, information has been entered for every one of these. I showed you the ones that have been updated. This shows you, in addition to how much you would have to set aside for this particular fund, which is town buildings and town hall combined. It shows you the total deposits for all funds, and what you would have to put aside for all of the funds.
Excuse me, what town hall?
Can't see.
You said it's for town buildings and town hall. What town hall?
This is working on what funds you have, and, let's see.
Do you mean
The
the?
old town hall.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
So
The
that we
whole
have
town hall.
two capital reserve funds. We have a town buildings capital reserve fund, and there is a renovating town hall capital reserve fund.
Okay,
And so this number that's up here, the 332,000, right here,
yeah,
which is the starting balance in the beginning of fiscal year 2022, that is the total of what's in town buildings capital reserve fund and renovating town hall capital reserve fund.
that's the total for both.
That's a total for both. The renovating town hall capital reserve fund is like 51,000, and the rest, about 280,000, is town buildings. And I've just combined them here because although money that's in renovating town hall capital reserve fund, it can only be used for town hall, but it's only got 50,000 in it. And the town buildings can be used for anything.
But is that broken down somewhere in that 332? You don't have to do it now, I'm just asking. It's one number, 332, but it's more than one building.
Oh, there is nothing, that when the fund was created, it was just a capital reserve for town buildings.
Yeah,
So it covers all town buildings. There's nothing that says it's for, that town buildings is for a town hall or
it's just a pool.
it's for all town buildings, correct. So that's transfer station, that's highway department, garage, that's everything.
Okay.
And existing or new.
On here is not buying the current new town hall, and it's not building a new town hall, is that correct, in all these numbers?
So in these numbers, there is town office building for a total of $1.5 million.
Okay.
And this got divided because at one time the question was asked, if we wanted to take out a bond for a new building,
Okay.
and we wanted the payments on that bond to match what we're currently paying or would be in the future paying
Right.
on the lease,
What would that be?
that would give you essentially a $600,000 lease.
Okay.
So that says, I'm sorry, $600,000 bond. So if you did that, over here, you put in B for bond. And you see all these numbers just went down. You put in B for bond, and it's gonna start in 2029, but you could pick something else. And down here in what comes from borrowing, there's the safety complex bond, which is already existing, the transfer station bond already existing, and it has now added the town office building from bond to start in 2029. And it went and looked at the lookup table to find out what our predicted interest rate would be for a bond in 2029. And it found in what we've entered is 3.5%. And this is, when I said 600,000, that's 600,000 at today's cost. In 2029 dollars, it's at 886,000.
Okay.
And if you look along here, you'll see where those payments come in. And right now, the only thing it does is a 20-year, 20-year uniform principal. So it makes uniform payments to principal every year. And of course, as you pay off the principal, the interest goes down, and so your payments go down each year. That's the only type of bond that right now I have formulas in there for handling.
And that's assuming that we're starting all the stuff for building a brand new office building in 2029, that is not building it before then.
That's correct, but right up here, you say,
Just change it.
okay, just change the number.
Right.
So if
Okay.
that number was, and I have a hard time seeing here, 2026, 2026. So a bond starts in 2026. It's 765,000. Well, let's use an even sooner number. 2023. It's a $661,000 bond. Starts in 2023. We think that in 2023 the interest is going to be lower. It's from that lookup table, which is one of the other worksheets, 2.1%, and you can see it starting here. You wouldn't want to do that because it overlaps with the bonds you have. So you might want to start it in 2025 or 2026, so that you don't have these bonds payments overlapping. But that's
Well, but you're also spending money on your lease, so
yeah. This is where
that money would stop
you
happening.
you use this tool to say, okay, what if we did and change the dates?
All right, thank you.
So that was, the 2029 was only chosen as the furthest out that
Right.
it could be. And if you, so here's one that's close. Town hall rehabilitation, just to show you how this works. See, right now that shows up as 302,000 right there. But if you were to decide, just don't see any way that you can pay for that, put in an X, and it goes away.
Okay.
It's still in the list, you still have all the information about it, but it's not being added in, it's not part of the calculation up here of how much you have to set aside.
Got it. So we have to decide, by looking at what these things cost, what we're actually going to go forward on and what we're not. Do you want to wait?
Here we go, sorry. I'm sorry, I was trying to figure out the keyboard.
That's okay. So we have to figure out what are the things that we need to focus on and figure out, and then we have to figure out if there are things that we just aren't gonna do and can't do and have to give up on. And we have to figure out how we're gonna pay for the things that we are gonna do.
Yes. And that's, of course, across all of these, town buildings, highway equipment, roads and bridges and so forth. Other things that we need to figure out what they should be. I've put in the 5% as the annual increase for the buildings. That was, just came from what I was showing you with the Turner Building Cost Index. This number is used for everything on the list. If you got really fussy, you might like to tailor it to say, well, in the early years it's going to be higher, in the later years it's going to be lower or something, or this type of building versus that type of construction,
Yep.
maybe it should be a different number.
We
but
just have to get started.
it uses one number for everything. The other thing is these inputs right up here. This does not add a margin to each of the expenditures. The expenditure is what you think it's actually going to be.
Yep.
But you don't want to make a plan, in most cases, you don't want to make a plan where if everything comes out just exactly the way you think, you'll close out the year with zero in the bank, zero in that fund. So here's a place where you can put in what margin do I want to have left at the end of the year. And there's three numbers you put in as a percentage of the expenditure for that year, with an upper limit and a lower limit. And that way you have the margin, but the margin didn't get added to every number down here. The margin is just, you're gonna make sure you always have that amount. You don't go below it.
Great. So we have Steve here who has had to not be where he was supposed to be.
Yes.
So, Steve, can I ask you, as you were going through this, if there were things that really stood out to you as kind of a crisis needing to be focused on first?
No, as we've gone through the buildings, there's things that are on here that we found that aren't on here that need to go on. The biggest problem is the library, because they want to do a renovation, but they're not fixing the furnace that's 20-something years old. They're not fixing an air conditioning system that's on its last legs. We had to fix a light over there the other day, and the old schoolhouse, every clapboard on the front of that building is rotten, covered in a 1/4 inch of paint, and all that needs to get replaced. So there's no point in repainting the outside of the library if every single clapboard on the old schoolhouse is rotten.
Right.
But those aren't, their furnace and air conditioning system aren't on this, because there's a library fund, so I'm pretty sure it's under that.
Right.
But they want me to get prices for them so they can try to get the ARPA money to pay for this,
Right.
so they don't have to spend it out of their renovation fund.
So it's not included in all those old things or not?
No, but it's all stuff that needs to get done,
Right.
that's not on anything. This building we're currently sitting in now has a lot of stuff wrong with it.
Yeah. I saw that there was, the roof was gonna need to be redone. Is there any way
At
that
some point,
when the roof is redone, we can redo it enough so we don't have some of the problems we have? Or is it just gonna be
it's gonna get reshingled.
reshingled? Okay.
Like, we gotta build a doghouse over the fire department
Yes.
door. That's like top on the list, because that's a safety issue.
Yeah.
I got a person coming to look at that.
What's this one?
Tom's Sallyport had the water damage that is being fixed underneath insurance, but the wall and the sheathing on the wall, on the outside wall, is rotten, and there's holes in it that are showing the backside of the Tyvek wrap.
And that's not part of the insurance? So we
Nope.
have to fix that?
It's not, so you have to take the whole outside wall off to fix that. But none of that reaches the level of, so I did this CIP wise, it didn't reach capital,
Okay.
you know, the $5,000 limit. So, but that's just stuff that we would fix, and it's, when I do my budget presentation in 2 weeks, there's monies I increased in the maintenance and renovation to fix stuff like that.
Okay. So we're looking at the stuff that you're thinking of that's not the lower
Um,
items.
Well, let me say,
Like,
one of the advantages of this tool is this is the select board's tool.
yeah,
So the select board gets
Can
to
add that,
decide
yeah.
what the rules are.
Right.
yes,
And so you are not bound by any particular minimum dollar figure.
Right.
The trustees of trust funds, when we get a request for reimbursement, we look to see, does it meet the purpose of the fund,
Mm-hmm.
and is it properly authorized? So if there was no agents, it had to go to a town vote.
Mm-hmm.
If there's an agent, did the agent, in almost all cases, it's the select board,
Mm-hmm.
did the select board actually vote to buy that, and is the thing that we bought what they voted for?
Okay.
And the amount, the dollar amount doesn't matter. As long as it fits the purpose of the fund, and it's correctly authorized and documented,
Okay.
it can be reimbursed.
But those are things that we can add maybe another time,
On-
that are little things that we can
Yeah.
deal with later.
on this currently, museum deck and ramp, that's bad, that needs to get done, that's
Right.
really rotten. And the furnace in the old town hall, they don't make parts for anymore.
Right.
And now that you've got the library using that space, the furnace is gonna run, and I don't know how long that furnace is gonna stay running for.
And I think that's what my biggest concern is that we have on our list of care so many old buildings that all need so much care. And of course, we would love to save everyone and have them all, be useful for something. I'm concerned when you put together the price of the furnace, the fixing the clapboards, fixing all the roof, all these things. Are we looking at value added compared to when you take away the price that the town has to pay for something, and are they getting what they need, and are we doing the best we can? If somebody's using a building, are they helping to pay for that building? Are we getting enough value added for the community from that use? I just think those are things we have to start thinking about, because, we're looking at the parish house, we're looking at the annex and all these places, and, I think we have to really get into the details, because, spending $100,000 each building to just try to get them to survive and have the basics functionings, that's a lot of money.
Well, for example, I haven't seen the parish house pop up on any of
It is not on here.
It's not on, so, we need to get, collectively, we need to look at what all the buildings are and get an estimate on what needs to be done and when it needs to be done.
Right.
And roll that up, because you're absolutely right. There's several buildings out there. There's the annex, there's the museum, there's the library, there's
And
the
they're
old
fun
town
to
hall,
have.
there's the parish house, and, to me, that should be, if you would, on one sheet, and say, here's your risk for all these 5 buildings or 6
Yeah,
buildings.
let's just see each building
And
individually.
then you have to prioritize which one's number 1 and which one's, number 6 or whatever.
I have 2 comments. One, we're in the situation that we're in now, because this hasn't been done
Right.
in the past.
Which is why we're doing it.
And the other thing, when you talk about, leaving off the small things,
They add up.
as a trustee of trust funds, I can tell you, we have in some years paid for quite a few $1,000s in things that were never on the CIP. The record was actually up around $70,000 in 1 year
Wow.
for things that were not on the CIP.
Yeah.
But they fit the purpose of the fund, and that's our only criteria.
Right.
We have no authority to make any decisions about whether the money should be spent on this or that.
Right.
It's just, does it fit the purpose of the fund, is it properly authorized?
Well, I think the other issue that we haven't even brought up is that there is chatter, and I'll call it chatter because I don't really know where it stands, for a new town hall,
Right.
i.e., what we had was at one time, a more modern whatever, and it got voted down. So that's still out in the wings.
Right.
And most certainly would impact on what we do with the older buildings and how much money we put into them.
Steve, I have a question. As somebody's been working on the Daily building, do you have any opinion about if that was an option to purchase for the town? I don't know if it is, I have no idea what that would be.
You got it for the right price, because everything in it's not new,
Right.
so you have to make sure you get it for the right price.
But if we did that, we would have a known entity, we would have a number, like this is how much it costs, we need a bond for this, we're gonna buy it, and then you just have to deal with the maintenance and the upkeep.
Then you prioritize which one comes first.
Right. So I just think that's something to think about, because I think one of the things that is overwhelming when we're doing these numbers is, well, what's that really gonna be? And you say it costs this much, but then it adds on. That's one of the things that, concern me with the library project. I think we have to be really, really honest with people who live here about what things are gonna cost. And so I think there's something to be said about that. If it's an office building that we're enjoying and that is the right space and that people, utilize, it's an option down the road.
That's a reason why, even if it's just $2,000 or $4,000, I think you put it on the list.
I agree. My concern is just that how much it takes for Steve, who's already got, what did you say, 75% of this project is?
Correct, 75 for this is.
And I know
is
Steve has
Steve.
tons of free time to be,
The
But if-
library project needs to get looked at, because if you're not fixing mechanical systems in the old building, you're just getting a half new building and the rest of the building's falling apart. So what's the point in building a new building if you've still got failing systems in the old part?
and the question becomes, does it cost more to get that building up to where it needs to be, or to build a new one? And one of the things that I've been learning in my own looking into buildings is that sometimes the new building done right is actually cheaper than the bits and pieces all around trying to put it together. So I think we just have to know those numbers.
I think you've put yourself in the corner with the library, though, turning it historical, so there's really nothing you have to. you're
Isn't
not
it just
gonna
the
get
schoolhouse historical?
It's the schoolhouse that's on the state register.
Right.
But that also means that there's the possibility of getting some assistance for some of what it needs.
Yep.
So if it needs clapboards replaced, and that's the historical structure, you can probably make up the difference between doing it the cheapest, you may be able to make up the
With
difference
the
between
funding,
doing it the
yes.
cheapest way
Yep.
and doing it the way that preserves the heritage, the historical
Right.
fabric. That extra cost may be able to come from a grant.
Which is great,
Get
and that
some
adds
assistance.
value to the town, which is nice.
Correct.
Because I think that's the thing that our town does want. We want to preserve everything we can, and we want to preserve it the best we can.
Right.
We just have to stop not taking care of things.
I think that there is a lot more work to be done here, and looking at everything that all of a sudden has gotten on Steve's plate, with the almost zero base that he has to work from,
Right.
it's a big task.
How do we support Steve?
And I think, I mean, this has to be a process of continuous improvement, and we are, right now, much better off than we were,
Yeah.
you know, 1 quarter or 2 quarters ago.
Yep.
So we have a list, and it's like 4 pages long of things that need to get done to all the buildings.
So could
But
we
So,
add
there-
this?
so let me.
Not on this, because they didn't meet what I thought.
Right.
Let me show you some of the things that I could do to help Steve. So the transfer station replaced sprinkler piping. So when I met with Steve this morning, he gave me some ideas of how he thinks a cost could be calculated.
Great.
And so from what he told me about how many runs of pipe there are and how, I went and then looked up how long the building is, and he had what it actually cost, this $1,145, to replace one section, 20-foot section of the leaking Schedule 20 with new Schedule 40. And so I worked up, here's, for planning purposes, $18,000.
Great.
Here's how it was calculated. And yeah, this number may not be, if we go out for bid, this may not be the number. It certainly won't be the number,
Right.
but it's a reasonable number.
Right, it's educating us.
And I think that there's probably other things, either coming from Steve or maybe from Bill, where with that information, you know, Steve told me, and we talked about it, I said, oh, so we could do this, we'll derate it by 80% because you're doing it all at once, and here's a number. I can do that stuff.
Awesome.
So
So maybe we get that 4 pages of.
But it was a cooperative thing.
Right.
So we've been trying to do this, but we've also been trying to get everything together for the budget presentation on what needs to get done to the buildings
Right,
to
it's just a
justify
lot.
the increase in the budget
Right.
for M&R. So we've kind of been doing 2 things. And I can tell you that a lot of stuff got kicked down the road, little maintenance-wise, for a long time.
Yeah, decades.
To get to where we're at, right, like, we have to, every single light on the old town hall outside doesn't work anymore, we have to replace those, we just did one on the library.
Right.
And it wasn't as big of a deal, but now that there's gonna be kids over there for the kids' programs, we
Right.
gotta make sure that the lights are on. So,
it feels really overwhelming, and I think that's the thing, is that when you start to dive into it, it's like, where do you even start? And that's why I feel like at some point we have to say, are there things we can take off the plate altogether? Can you know, like, let's say we said, the parish house, just we, as a town, don't have a need for it, don't have the money for it.
so I've been in that building, and my personal opinion on that building is you're getting close to the point where if you don't get enough grant money for it, you're not getting your return on investment. I wouldn't have said that a year ago if we were still in the town hall,
Right.
because the whole purpose of renovating it was to put commissions and committees in there.
Right.
The new town office has room for the committees and commissions, so what are we renovating the parish house for at this point?
So are
And
there
if
other,
you build a new town hall, that is, or a town office building like you have there for 2029, you're still gonna get room for committees and commissions, so still, what's the point in renovating the
Right.
parish house?
and the parish house has to be moved to be used anyway. So is there any,
Not necessarily.
No, they can do a lot line
No.
adjustment. I'm just speaking, I think and the longer you let it sit, the more the
the
skew
less
is
value
going
has, right?
the wrong way.
So
for
is it, is that like one of those kinds of things that we have to say, we have to come up with another plan for this? Either we have to offer it up to nonprofits, or we have to think of what we're gonna do with it, but we have to just say, that's not something we can handle. And how do we get that courage? How do we do that?
That's up to you guys.
Well, let's not.
I'm picking a random house that I'm just trying to think of, like something that works.
You're increasing the scope of this, and it's already big as it is. So let's,
Yeah,
Focus
But like,
on-
but if we're gonna, let's say we decide that, because all these things have expenses, that's what I'm worried about. We have a habit of just saying, we'll save it and we'll deal with it later, and this is all the later, and it can't keep happening. So if we spend $5,000 to fix the historical society,
that's a
Yeah.
safety hazard.
right, which needs to be done right away, are we saying, yes, so we're now committing to keeping the historical society where it is and doing that?
You can fix a deck and still move the historical society and
Yeah.
move the deck with
And
it.
that's true.
Someone's going to fall through, the one that is currently there, if
Yeah.
we do not fix it.
So is that one of those things we can do with the current money we have for this year? Since it's a safety issue.
Are you asking if you can pay for it out of the $332,000?
I'm
Is that
asking
enough?
if it's part, yeah, no, I'm saying, is it one of those things that's part of the building's budget anyway?
So the building's budget for construction stuff like that's $19,000 to cover every single building in town.
Goodness gracious.
Half of that goes toward HVAC. So if I spend $5,000 on a deck, there's no money left in
Right.
case something happens.
So it would have to come out of the building.
Yes, and I also think we should, and this is gonna run into a problem because of the uncertainty, but we really need to look at what we're gonna do with the furnace in the old town hall. Because last year, the fan
Furnace.
broke in the
Not
middle
the
of,
furnace?
the deliberative session on, when we did it virtually, and I had to leave and go out find a fan. We found the last blower fan for it in New Hampshire. They don't make parts
Right.
for that furnace anymore. It's obsolete and it's 20-plus years old, so you're at the end of its useful life. It's just like every air conditioning system, except for the room we're in this building, is at the end of its useful life.
This is one of those items that we do need to fine tune a little bit because it's listed soon, 2022.
That 12,000 number's off and
Yes.
it's high.
Here's the furniture history of what we've spent.
Okay.
And I went and looked up what have we spent on previous furnaces. Now, what's there is a boiler. These are all furnaces. You take the cost of the furnace and you bring, I just used 3%.
Right.
At 3%, you bring all of these 2019, 2018, 2016 costs up to, at the time I did this, it was July 14th, 2021, and you can see we haven't spent anything near $12,000.
Right, so let's say it's $7,000.
But but these were all furnaces, that's a boiler, boilers are a little more expensive, but we ought to just get an estimate, a better estimate than $12,000.
Even if you put a good furnace in it, you're not moving, when you finally decide what that building's gonna be, you're not gonna move the furnace out of where it is, everything's in that room. So the furnace, you're putting it in now, but that furnace is still gonna be there once you renovate and do whatever you're gonna do with the building.
What's the total for this one?
What's,
If we want a total, you know, what's in front of us, what's on the
Oh,
plate, can we get a
okay.
total?
yeah, if you come down
You're
to.
sitting down, that's good.
You come down to.
It's like 6 million or something.
Oh, so I was telling you about the bond rates. This is a chart where you just make your estimates about bond rates. And then this is, can't see the whole thing, but these are summaries. So the annual cost increase that was entered individually on every one, some of them as low as 2%, which is probably too low, up to 5%. The required end-of-year margin, this shows you what is set on every one of those. And then over here, the cost totals. Buildings, town buildings is this first one. And in fiscal year 2022 cost, it totals 4.17 million. And when you look at all the nominal future costs, that for whatever it's worth, that adds up to 5.3 million. And town buildings is 32%, practically a third of the total.
Where if it was a normal world and we had been taking care of them all, it would be much more like 20 or something small, right?
Up until about 2007, we had 2 decades in which the town set aside every year, voted on money for maintenance and improvements of town buildings,
But it was like
And-
50,000.
and separately voted on an appropriation to the town buildings capital reserve fund. So the maintenance and improvement to town buildings, like replacing the windows in the town hall or replacing the furnace, those did not come out of the town buildings capital reserve fund.
Right.
Those were paid year after year, and it's about 2 decades of it being done regularly.
And then we
And
just-
sure, way back then, it was like only $10,000 a year, and then it was 15, so
Right,
we're talking 10 to 30 years ago. And then that stopped.
and that's why we're where we are.
Yeah.
We stopped having the courage to make the right choices.
So what do we do? I mean, we've gone through the buildings, we see a whole chunk of money that's in front of us that we need to pay to
We have
start
to
doing
decide
something.
what,
This
What do
is,
we do?
this
What
is
do
what
we-
we've figured out so far. I mean, this building you're sitting in now, at some point, is gonna need new windows in it. It's not in there yet.
the thing we have to
Yeah.
say is, first of all, what do we have to save? What do we have to do? And then what do we want to do? What would we like to save? And then think about how we're going to pay for all those things. And I think what I'm trying to say is, I think we're facing some really hard choices that are very unpopular. And I think we have to look at what
Well,
that
that's how we
means.
got to this.
No, you guys didn't do the
No,
unpopular
it's
thing. You kept
exactly how we got
pushing
to
it
this.
off and not upsetting the town.
We've put articles out before to try and get this, get that, and they were all.
Just for one
were-
giant thing.
Yes.
No, that, you know, they were voted down, so we just went into a kind of hibernation as to,
Yeah.
okay, what do we do next?
It was ostrich head in the sand. So last year, John Teppan came and talked to you guys about what we needed just for, you know, the basics. And he said, I think it was 400,000 or something like that. And then you mentioned 300, and then somehow it got down to 100. And so we just haven't been able to wrap our head around the numbers. And the hard part is, I don't think that we can do all of this without it really negatively affecting every resident in this town. And yet, what does that mean? What do we, we've made mistakes in the past, how do we fix them so we can go forward as a town together?
I agree with you, but we don't go to the town yet. We
Right,
have to put the list up there and say, okay, what do we do first?
right.
What's priority one,
That's what I'm
what's
saying.
priority two, what's priority three, and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, sooner or later, that's what we gotta do. and
But like
then-
what he's saying is by not doing things like to a place like the parish house, you're actually decreasing value and it's becoming expensive just to own it.
So
I
I think
understand,
for the
but
very,
it's our baby. And so we,
Right.
we gotta deal with it.
So what's the baby and what's the bathwater? That's the question.
I think if there's a question of what do we do, what decisions do we make this week and next week, and the week after, I think that we continue to work on adding what else needs to be added to these, refining some of these estimates that are large numbers and come up soon,
Right.
and maybe we need to
I,
do a little better.
I wanna say, what's first?
I agree.
List all the buildings up there, or whatever the list is, maybe Steve makes the list, what's first?
I think Steve is great at knowing what is an
And we
emergency.
pick out what's first, and we put a price tag on it, and if we have to go to the voters, we go to the voters with it.
So, two things on this list. The
Need a light?
police department AC system and the ventilation system for the fire department bays. You can pay for out of the money that we got from the federal government. So you can pay for those two things out of it if you were going to give them to them right now out of the list. And you wouldn't have to
They come
worry
off the
about.
list.
And
You can
in
take
your
them off
mind,
the
in
list.
your mind, knowing all the stuff that's out there, would that be priority one?
So with that money, because that money was given to the town for air movement and ventilation, that was part of that ARPA funds money. So that you could pay for out of that, and there's two things, but that's if you wanted to do that. Out of both, I would recommend the air conditioning system for the police. It's been broken for 8 years and needs to get fixed. But like I said earlier, the things that need to get fixed on the buildings that are safety hazards as we speak is the deck, and I need to build something over the entrance to the fire station. So all the water coming off the roof and turning to ice, no one slips and falls and gets hurt.
So I think health and safety has to be number one. So we're talking about a ventilation system because our fire department is not safe. They're breathing in and they have around them.
I breathe the same stuff in a garage every day,
Yeah.
so,
So then we have to have that verified that that is something that needs to be done.
but so like, we're having problems with the air conditioning system that runs their bunk rooms. They were sleeping up there at one point when it was 86 degrees and the air
That's
conditioner
not
didn't
safe.
work. That's not okay.
Right. So that's health and safety.
The-
So how do we determine the ventilation system, the need? I guess that's why I was asking for some numbers so we can,
So that ventilation system is an accurate number, from what I gather, at 75,000.
Yeah,
The police department
he
air
actually-
conditioning system is pretty close. The new company that we awarded the bid to is giving me a price. The problem with that one is you can't just now replace the air handler because it's R22, everything now is 410, and 410 refrigerant will eat the solder out of the joints inside the old refrigeration system
that's fun.
because of the different oil that's in it, so you've gotta replace all the lines that go from outside to inside, or else you're gonna have leaks.
This spreadsheet doesn't have a ideal mechanism for establishing priorities.
So that's what, like,
But it's, I think we could have one. If you wanted to talk about town buildings, you could have a spreadsheet where we just look at all of these items and you go through some kind of a sort where you say, oh, 16 is more important than 22. So move that one up, and so forth,
right.
and see what you end up with. And then if you want, you can say, and the total amount of dollars we have is, and that's where the line ends up being drawn.
Yeah, and I think another thing I'd want to do is have everything organized by building. So, you know, annex here's all the things on annex and here's when they're due, here's all the things
Okay.
on each building. My concern is, so we're looking at this ventilation system, it's been brought to our attention that needs to get done, we can totally fund it if we wanted to. What I'm hearing is that we're not sure it's necessary, or that we also need one for the transfer station, one or the other.
No, there's a place for them. I would not mind one at the highway garage, but if we're in the process potentially of putting an addition on it, I don't see a point in spending money on one if you then have to take it out. to
So are
put
you
it in.
saying it is necessary and it is?
They
a
have their
safety
place
issue?
if you sit there with a truck inside idling, so you're not breathing in exhaust.
But how often do they do that?
Well, they're
I'm not-
concerned, but not
I'm
they brought
not
it to
them.
us.
Because they start up the engines and they're off to a call, they don't sit there and let it idle.
But that's the thing, is that they do have to let it idle while they're waiting for everyone to get on board, and during that time, that stuff is getting on all their clothing and all their stuff, and they're breathing all that stuff in, because it starts sound and goes up.
The system they have down there, they have CO2, the detectors, and that fan, according to the fire chief, has never come on.
Right,
So-
so he's saying, I don't think that it works right, so they run it all the
Well-
time. That's why I asked if we could get actual CO2 readings, so that we would know.
You have readings, but
Yeah.
like they're sleeping here now all the time. Bunk rooms would, to me, would be higher on the list because they're
Absolutely.
living here now.
You have 24-hour shifts, and you need to have a place to get a good sleep, so you're rested during 24 hours, which means it's good to have a bunk. And plus, I'm hoping that we have, men and women together, I think everyone needs.
He
their own
really
space.
should be speaking to these. Granted,
Right,
they're
but that's my
now-
point.
They're now half my responsibility, but they're still his wants.
Right, but what I'm saying is, if it's true that the ventilation system is necessary, I think we need to move on that right away. If it's not necessary, then we need to take it off. So I think that's one of those things where it's either like really, really vital, and we have to come to an agreement on that, or it can go away.
I've seen plenty of firehouses that have them.
Yeah. And I don't think he'd bring it up to us if it wasn't a real
I
concern that really,
know Durham just put one in.
right.
But I'm just, you have the money with the federal funds to pay for that, and the AC system for the police department, you can take those right off the list
Right,
right now.
which makes sense to me, and I think that's something maybe we do have to figure that out first. What can we take off the list with the ARPA funds, get it going, and we have the money in hand, do those things. And then we can start looking at the rest of the list. What are the health and safety issues that have to be cared for? And I think that if we're, I'm very concerned that we have the people that are here literally for our health and safety, and they don't have sprinkler systems, or they spunks, or ventilation systems. Like, these things are concerning when that's the person you literally call on for your health, and we aren't taking care of them ourselves.
I also don't know what exactly all of that money is allowed to be spent on. I know it's air handling and ventilation, but I know there's other stuff, I just don't know what it
It's
is.
because of how we got it, because of the decrease, it's different rules than if it was only certain areas, right?
Yes.
So we have some flexibility. But I think, that's the thing, everyone's thinking, well, it should happen to my building, we should do it to this thing, so we have to be aware, spending it all in one place, it's not gonna be great either.
That's why it's important to go through all of these,
Exactly.
because.
We're just looking at this page, so I don't know, if we
It's-
scrolled it, we'd look at
It's
something else.
34% of them or whatever, dollar-wise, but we've got other things down there too.
Right,
So maybe what we need to go through and look at things that are life safety or safety type issues and take a look at those first.
right.
Because, John and I have been on these committees where is it a need or is it a want?
Yes.
So we have to determine which it is. So I think life safety is something we need.
Yep.
So maybe those things come first, but like you said, Mr. Brown, what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to get to? And I think something that Steve, that you brought up, that I'm not sure how far back it goes, but if we've been negligent in terms of building maintenance, sounds like we have,
Yep,
I think that is kind of a different kind of look at these things versus looking at this. Because if we need to allocate more money in the operating budget for maintenance, then we should do it.
And
Versus
honestly,
this is
Yeah.
something, I don't necessarily want to put in something in here that's $2,000.
Yeah,
I think that's more of a maintenance type thing.
but we'd have to change the budget to reflect, so
Well,
that's
yes.
covered.
and that's what
When
I'm
you
going,
say-
I
when
got
you
pictures,
say-
so that's what I'm gonna present.
Right,
one of the things, I believe, like you say, if we wanna put more money in for maintenance, I think we need to say what maintenance.
Yeah.
He's got
You
4
know,
pages.
having a
so-
one-line
and
maintenance,
then
that's
just
one
doing it.
thing. The question is,
Right.
where's it gonna go?
And that's-
we keep working off on it.
That's what Steve is working on. He's 4 pages and he's got that lined out and he can say, these are the things I'm doing next year.
And,
this is how much
and
it
that's
costs.
what we need to do with all the buildings.
Exactly.
Is to say which one's gonna come first, what's gonna be done. I don't even know, to be honest with you right now, where we are on the ADD program, the disabilities.
Yeah.
Oh, the ADA?
Yeah, you know, I mean, we just need to get a better handle on what's out there and then make some decisions to get something started.
Well,
We
the
gotta have
thing,
direction somehow.
the thing that's disconcerting to me, and unfortunately, I'm gonna blame Steve because he brought it up, just because he noticed it. This whole thing, we're having the library do this beautification thing inside, but the structure of their building needs way more help than what they need inside.
Mhm.
And that's a little disconcerting.
But we weren't letting them do anything, so we had to at least let that move forward somehow.
I think there's more pressure involved.
My opinion is if they have $500,000 in the library renovation budget, they should use that money to make the furnace and
One
air
of the issues
conditioning
that came
work.
up at one time that Scott raised was asking them to do what was it, a plumbing, assessment of plumbing and electrical
Yeah, how'd that
inside the
go?
building and so on. I met with them and asked them to do that, reinforced it, and said, you need to get that done, but you don't know what you have.
Did they do
I
that?
don't know whether, I don't know whether they've done that or not.
So maybe what we need to realize is that until, I know that they want to do a renovation or an addition or whatever, but are we deciding that no matter what, the building that we have right now is going to be a building that we continue to keep and maintain? I know we have the old school part. We're gonna keep and maintain all that, then I think no matter what you do with the rest of the building, you have to update the basic systems. So, yeah, I agree with you, that money should
Which
come.
building you talking
The
about?
library.
The
So
library.
if we're talking about the library and we're saying, we're committing as a town, this will be our library, this is the building we're using, and we're not gonna, take it down and start fresh or whatever, then, yeah, we need to do those things.
I agree with you, I agree.
And I think that,
I
yeah.
have said prior, I think the library is a very, very important building,
Yes.
if you would. To me, it's kind of the keystone that we should build off of to look at what else, we need to do. There's, again, I go back to, there's talk about going to the new modern office building and so on. That's been kind of put on the back page, rightfully so, because we've got a long list, but no, I think you're right. Well, the library is important. What's next? What's next? I don't know where we go next. I think we rely on Steve for that, I think, to rate
So
the buildings and what needs to be.
when I got the buildings, what I had envisioned, using that federal money was fix air handling in buildings that we currently are occupying, because that's where people are.
Yep.
The air conditioners in here are at the end of their useful life. This building should probably get the air handling money done to it.
Yep.
Because there's not enough funding, I don't believe, in the renovation budgets to do it. Or there might be, but you deplete them.
We need to find out, right? I mean.
And, yes, but to get a quote to redo everything in the entire building involves an it's a lot. It's not just, we're gonna do a couple lines.
No, I understand.
Because what they've talked about wanting to do where the building is so big is getting rid of all the compressors off the side of the building where the generator is and putting chilling towers in. So the heat in here would run off of Freon and the air conditioning would run off of Freon, and you could you could cool this room down and heat that room at the same time off the same system. And in doing that, the only reason you would need oil heat in this building anymore would be for the radiant heat in the fire base. So you could cut down on your oil consumption that way, and it would probably also reduce the energy cost in this building by 1/3, is what they thought,
Yeah.
because of how efficient it is. So
And
there's,
that's what I think we need to focus on, like the long-term savings as well.
But what does that system cost?
Right,
And what's its payback?
right.
yes,
exactly.
well,
So if it's-
I don't know yet, but that's what they're talking about. But in looking and doing that, and the library's got $500,000, they have enough money to put a furnace and an air conditioning system in their old building without federal funds.
Right.
Well, the thing I was gonna say, in terms of, and those two things are good, but in terms of their outside issues with their rotting clapboards and stuff, the selectmen are agents to expend on that larger fund. What stops us from saying, we need to do some work on the outside of the building using those particular monies? There's nothing that stops us.
So before we go that far, we need to check and see if there's lead paint on the outside of that
Yeah.
old schoolhouse, which we have not done yet. Because if that's the case, it's gonna cost a lot more, because you gotta get rid of it all.
Mhm.
Which is where John's idea of trying to get a grant would probably be a lot easier and cheaper.
And that's the thing, is we know all the things that have to be done, then you can start looking for grants where that's an option, and then just fixing the things that you know you can't do that with.
When did lead paint go out of, they stopped selling it?
70s.
So,
70.
so here's the thing, in the old town hall one gave you what was lead paint. The state rule for remediation is, I think, 5%. So if it's under 5%, you've been tested, you don't have to pay to remediate it. I think 80% of what was in the old town hall is under 5% concentration. So if you get lucky and it's under 5%, I think you're all right.
But the thing is, you have to do a test on that to see.
Yeah,
So maybe we need to get Mr. Damaris back and see if he can do the outside.
Yeah, and just for the record, there's like, I've done this myself, there's like $6 tests, you can just do a swipe and see, like just before you even start, like if you're really thinking it's not or something, you can do it, and if it turns
You mean
pink,
for-
it's got lead.
For lead testing?
Right, so for- if we're
Oh, yeah,
really-
it's very,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Super easy, you can buy a couple of them for places we're
Yeah.
concerned about.
it's like we probably should do the outside of the hobo shed, because that's peeling off so bad going in.
Right, we're gonna lose,
I
no,
believe we
It-
did
it-
it already,
Okay.
Not the hobo shed, just the town hall.
because the whole shed
The
is
whole shed was
lead.
done.
Well, we know it's lead,
Yes.
but there's no, we didn't do a test.
No, but when you walk by, it's all peeling off, it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
It's one of them things that really should get painted and
Yeah.
But how much does it cost to paint?
cheaper to encapsulate than remove, and encapsulate's allowed. The problem is it's already peeling off the hobo shed, so there's no encapsulation. If the library's lead on the outside, it doesn't do any good to encapsulate it when you need to get the boards off.
Right,
So you're past that point.
right.
So can you
Denise,
do
you
one of
were,
those little tests, Steve, to find out?
Yeah, I can find one.
That's
you were
what we do.
recalling that a test was done on the, I recall that also,
On the what?
On everything.
on the
Really?
tool shed.
I think we
Tool
should
shed
get that,
and town hall.
that list out, yeah. Yeah, I remember reading about
I
it.
I can do the one for, I'll find the little at-home test and try the
Yeah,
library.
you can get like a.
Because I only need to
five or
do one
something.
spot, it's not gonna be hard, it's one clapboard up front should tell me
Yep,
pretty much what the whole thing is.
I got bad news that way myself, so.
But you need to do if it's many multiple layers thick,
I know,
Right,
you
so
gotta get
because
all the
you
way down to
ship.
wood.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the under layers.
Yeah.
Because the recent coat is not.
And
You
then
know, it's latex.
the other thing, if we're taking off clapboards, that particular structure is not insulated. So if you're gonna take off the clapboards, you might as well insulate it at the
I
same time.
agree, because.
Except for the vermiculite in the ceiling.
Well, let's not open up the ceiling then. At least we can do the walls. Because I would hope when they're doing the inside stuff, they're gonna deal with that. But
So if a building is really special to us and we really need it and we're gonna use it like the library, I think that makes sense, but I want us to remember that all these little things, they all cost so much money.
Well,
I don't think
What
we'd
are the-
ever get anything passed in terms of getting the library a new structure.
I'm not saying the library structure, I'm saying I'm concerned about like the hobo shed and the annex and those things, like just, there's so much that goes into maintaining an old building.
if you look at some of those, like the tool shed, on annual cost, it's really not very much.
No, it's
Yeah.
not. But like, it's gonna end up, at some point, that's gonna need a new roof, and that's on the list
Yeah.
that I'm making with Bill, because you lose the roof, you lose the structure.
Right.
And like, the reason I'm so big on the old schoolhouse clapboards is you're getting to the point where water's gonna start getting in, and then you're gonna
Right.
start rotting the structure out, and then,
It's not worth anything.
Well, yeah, then it's gonna
So
cost
those
10
could be
times
worked on
more
right now,
for
and we could actually have them look for a grant for part of it, is what you're saying. And then we could
Yeah.
fund the rest.
You can apply, there's different places you can apply for grants.
Right.
So, the one that we're looking at for the parish house, they offer smaller grants, the LCHIP people, the smaller ones, $10,000, $25,000. So if that's on the list, so that's one of the qualifications, but if they apply for a grant to replace the clapboards and repaint it and insulate it, I don't know how much that would be.
I don't
But
either, I
Even
mean,
if they would give you $25,000 or $20,000, that's something you
help.
don't have to spend.
Yeah.
the
exactly.
cheapest way around it is put vinyl on it, but I hate to see vinyl go on that
No,
building.
I think that's.
Because then you would be encapsulated, and you don't have to do the removal, but vinyl wouldn't look good.
No, it would change the structure of that building. I love a good vinyl siding, but not on an old building.
I have to leave it in 20 minutes,
Okay.
so just
So
FYI.
what are we gonna do? So we're gonna figure out, I think I like what you guys were saying, where if you look at the actual, what it costs to have a building, if you look over a 20-year period, what does it cost the town each year? That's a helpful thing to have. Because then, when somebody says, why are you painting that hobo shed, that's silly, you can be like, well, the shed actually has value, it only costs us this much a year. And, we just have to do this once in a while, or whatever. I wanna be able to speak to why we're spending money on things.
A person that works, or did work for New Hampshire Preservation Alliance pointed out to me that there are no buildings that stay new,
Of course,
There are no buildings, what?
that stay new.
but
So you build a
you
new
take care for
building
them.
and you think it doesn't have any maintenance because it's a new building.
Right,
Well, you can only ignore that for so long, like the age of this building,
yes.
and things start breaking. So there are no buildings that stay new.
Of course, but when you have maintained a building, it's different than when you have to
That's
start from
different.
scratch, which is where we're at.
Yes.
So we have all the things all right now to do.
Because we're actually, maintenance-wise, we're playing catch-up. That's what we're doing.
Right.
Yes.
The only building that we're not playing catch-up maintenance-wise on is the transfer station.
And that's run by somebody who I think took good care of it.
It was before me, but they had their own, that and the town had their own building maintenance line items, and they weren't they
And
weren't
going forward, that's how everything should
with
be.
the other side of town, so they were able to somewhat make their own decisions on what they fixed.
Can I put something on your list, Steve, if
Yeah.
it's not there already? One thing that previous transfer station managers, we've asked them to do, and they don't seem to ever have got to it, is that particular building needs a generator backup.
I keep
Because,
looking, you've had that on my list, we almost bought one 2 years ago at the state auction.
oh, well, let's put it on there again, because and I know it only happens periodically,
Yeah,
but when the
boy.
power is out, people need to get rid of their trash, and they can't wait, 7, 8, 10, whatever days.
That's a really good point.
So even if we have one, even if we can, the one that's sitting in the hobo shed, that's a portable one,
That'll run parts of it,
so,
but I
But
talked
I
to
don't-
John earlier,
Yeah.
that might change, because yeah.
so it needs a solution, so if we can use the portable, if we need one that's generated, and
Not 100% sure that
that's, yeah.
if we go to replace all the old balers and trash compactors in there, we can buy a generator that will even run the new ones that are coming out, because they need to be like 440 or 660, not 220.
Oh.
So
And
we
they
need to
have their
think
own
for
separate
the future.
transformers with them. All the new stuff is got like 80 horsepower motors compared to the 20s that we're running.
We need some solution so that if that particular
Okay.
thing loses power,
Yeah.
what are we gonna do? And if the compactors need that, I don't know,
Okay, so that's a building cost,
yeah.
the generator.
I almost bought one last year, it was close.
But I like the thinking forward in the future. I'd much rather have purchased something that's gonna be good going forward than that is obsolete in 2 years. So that's great.
The only good thing I can say is this, with our own roll-off truck coming,
Mhm.
if we are open and there's no power, we can put the trash in open top dumpsters, compact it with the block, and haul it ourselves up to turnkey,
Okay.
and we don't need power to get rid of MSW. We
Okay.
can do it the old-fashioned way. The only thing we
That's
need
great
power
news.
for is to bale, and baling can wait. but we would be able to be open and get rid of trash.
Okay.
So
Well,
that
that's
is
the-
beautiful. That's
That's
a
the
happy
effort,
moment.
so
Yeah.
yes, I don't care how you solve it, but you
Yeah,
just
let's
need a
solve
way
these
that
problems.
if there's no power, how do we get rid of?
Right,
Yeah, so with our own truck, obviously, we can make as many trips now to turnkey as we want in that situation, so we'd be able to just throw it into open tops.
perfect.
So, just a sidebar, when you checked out the truck, it's what we ordered, we're
I haven't
good?
checked
He
it
just
yet, it
cares if
hasn't
it's
come in
red,
yet.
that's
Oh,
all.
I thought you said it came in.
It is red, I have seen a
All right,
picture of
so are
it.
you okay now?
Well, I can sleep now that I know that it's
It's
red.
red,
Just wanna make sure it's equipped.
it's been built and it's on its way from Ohio to Manchester.
Okay,
Hey, great.
good.
All right, so we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of things to focus on. We're gonna ask John to help us add some more things. We're gonna try to get them organized by building.
Okay,
And,
so in the town buildings, you would like to have this organized by building.
is that okay?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I
Could
will-
do some color coding. you
Oh,
know?
I like that.
So to me, that's easier if it's all organized by building, just because there's so many of them.
I
But
naturally
when
don't
you
like
say
orange to make a
organized-
bad building orange.
When you say organized by building, you would also like to see a total per building for each building.
I would love that, if that's not too much to ask. But I mean, I asked for this, so
What's
I already
the,
asked for too much.
John, what's the status of the other tabs down here? I know Steve's got the lion's share of everything, but what
Okay,
about
so-
the rest of them?
So highway equipment, Steve has
Steve's
given me
again.
stuff on that, we've made updates, roads and bridges, he's made updates.
Yep.
The fire chief sent me information on fire equipment and also ponds and cisterns.
Yep,
Steve for transfer station, I heard nothing from the library at
I
all.
wrote to the library and I heard from Annie, but then when I wrote back to her, and she didn't, I didn't hear back from her again after I said more specifically what I was talking about
Got
in the
it.
first email.
And
So
Maybe they're working
I'll
on
have to
it.
circle back on
Yeah.
that.
I've heard nothing from recreation.
Larry will need to be,
yeah, they talked
Roger.
about tennis courts.
Yep.
I think that's
Oh.
their only thing.
This is what's on there from the CIP.
He was talking about the, putting the concrete on, under the
Pavilion.
pavilion, which was as, the couple
Which
people were
is not
concerned
listed
about.
here.
Yeah, and we were very concerned about that for a lot of reasons, so that's something we can discuss another time.
Land acquisition just has a placeholder thing in it. Accrued benefits,
is that the one that
yes,
Joanne's-
this is one that Joanne is
Joanne's
working on
working on?
because
Yeah.
Great.
one of the things we don't know is that increases both with wage and salary increases and also with personnel count.
Right,
So Joanne was gonna look at historically, how has that increased?
great,
I have the information on what we've paid for the last 15 years on it, but
okay, so we'll look back.
and then revaluation, we have information
I
there.
hear you that, yeah.
And so we have numbers. You can actually click on this and you get Julie's spreadsheet and it shows what the bids were last time, the 4 companies and what the prices were. And you can see here where the low bid was 39,000. I've put it in at 50,000 because 50,000 is essentially the median.
Right,
When you get 4 bids and one of them is much lower,
you just take that out.
you can't necessarily count on getting that the next time.
Right,
So I put it in at 50,000, so we've got that
That's nice.
information.
I don't think we use them again anyways.
Exactly, I was gonna say.
So,
give it to me.
so that's why we put it in at 50,000. And these are a couple of extras.
Great,
And I'm working with the police chief. So this is not something that should be considered as, because we've got to do some more work on this. He has sent me some bids that he's gotten. And then the other thing, this is not the way to do it, I have a better idea, for items that are just gonna come from the annual budget. Because instead of, you buy a police car every year, so you don't wanna take up 20 rows
right,
with 20 police cars. So I think the things that come from the annual budget will be down the bottom here in a different way of entering it, so that you can tell This is an annual budget item. It's gonna start this year, it's gonna end on a certain year, and then it will do the escalation, and it will show up as, every year that it should in one row.
Can we
for-
also, one of the things that we kind of forget about, but I know the police and fire chief don't, is the special duty fund, in terms of keeping track of how much is actually in there, and maybe using some of that money to fund some of these particular things, not
I
necessarily.
was thinking
cruisers,
also
but-
about we've recently had some pretty large sums of money from some drug busts, and I found out recently that they don't have to be used, that money does not have to be used on drug-related, as I was previously told. And so things, are there some things here that could get knocked off with that funding?
So, back to what Scott was just talking
Sorry,
about.
yes.
So, that's another source of funding. So it isn't just, it might come from the annual budget, or it might come from, well, there isn't a bond for police equipment, but,
Yeah.
or from a bond, or it might come, in the case of police equipment, from that revolving fund. So there should be a category where you can say, okay, the radar trailer or whatever, and stick in a code, so that it's not something you're saving for, except you're kind of saving for it in that revolving fund. Yeah, I can put in a code for that.
So maybe down at the bottom where you've got those other funding sources you can get from Joanne, how much is in there? Maybe get an idea in terms of how much goes in every year.
Is
Yeah.
Chief Johnsfield supposed to come?
He's not feeling well,
He's not feeling
so
well?
he's not gonna make it.
Okay. I need to go.
Okay.
I'm running out of time for things I need to do.
Okay,
Me
so
too.
we have a plan.
uh,
Steve, thanks for coming late notice, we apologize that wasn't.
Yeah, I think going forward, if we can, I thought we had this discussion, but maybe we didn't. It would be nice to have these meetings like at 5 o'clock. That's the earliest time I can get here, but then the department head doesn't have to
I
stay.
agree, and we need to give them, make sure they know what day we're talking
Yeah.
about, but I think, we just have a lot to figure out still, and I don't know when we're gonna.
Yeah, I think it would be good, rather than just say, financial planning tool.
Right.
That we narrow it down to some subjects within the financial planning tool, like maybe buildings or whatever. And try
Well,
and
that's fine.
concentrate more on some specific items that we need to do.
Yeah, like today, when we just focused
Yeah.
on the building, and we did exactly
So-
that.
When are we gonna meet again? Going to do the 27th?
I have a
As
lot
long as it's not
coming up
for me.
soon. Yes. I
Because
think
I'm here
we
the
could-
26th, that's the only reason. I
Oh, you're going someplace? Okay.
No, I got my budget presentation on the 26th.
Yeah, he only wants to come hang out with us so much.
Oh, he doesn't like us that much.
No, he does.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, but he doesn't want to do 2 days in a row.
What day did you say?
I was suggesting the 27th, but that's another Wednesday, but
If I have to,
I'm
I'll go
amenable
far
to
enough in
those.
advance. So,
I can do that, my daughter has an infusion that day, but we should be over then.
okay, 5 o'clock?
Does that work for everybody else?
5 o'clock on the 27th?
And now let's very clearly discuss, who do we need to be here? So
Like I
you tell
said,
them now.
I can do it, so if you just wanna do, I'll just come and get them over with. If you wanna do,
Okay.
Wait, but if we're making Steve come all the way back in, what time are we having the meeting on the 26th?
I didn't go home today. I stayed here the entire
Sorry.
time.
26th
The
at 6
26th
o'clock.
is 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
And I'm here for like 2 hours for a budget presentation.
So we're saying he's gonna come in at 5 on the same day and not do the 27th? I just missed that, I apologize.
No,
Okay.
coming in the 26th and the 27th. The 26th at 6, the 27th at 5. Do you,
I get that. Does that make sense to you, Steve, or should we just have
We still
him?
got-
Do you wanna-
wait a minute.
What's on the
do you want
20th?
him to come in again and do him again? Is
I
that
just
the-
feel like that's a lot.
Well, get me done and over with.
So but you don't think you'd wanna come in on the 26th at 5 and then do a presentation? I just. feel
I mean, I
that's-
can if you wanna do it early. I just don't know if an hour's gonna be long enough to do highway equipment, transfer station equipment, roads and bridges.
I feel like it's all kind of the same. It's just, I mean, one's budget I get for next year, and that we need the team, the ABC, for. I just trying to think of how to use your time, Steve, in the best way, so you're not leaving.
Today wouldn't have been a big deal if I'd have known, instead of telling a 6-year-old that I was going on a haunted walk with her all week and then all of a sudden not being able to go.
We shouldn't have made you.
So, that's, if I'd just known like 4 days ago, it wouldn't have been as big a deal. But then I can come the 26th and the 27th, it's 2 weeks from now, so.
Okay.
Okay. So
So
Denise, can you post it?
did we settle on something? Is it the
Yes, yeah, we
27th?
did.
So it's
27th
it's
at
on the
5.
27th, 5 PM. Steve is going to be the attendee, and it's highway equipment, roads and bridges and transfer station,
Yeah, hopefully we can get through it all.
with possibly some new items added to town buildings or updated.
Yeah, I should have better, yeah, I should have more. I keep getting more every single week, so.
Can I officially ask you to take down the banners at the end of this month?
The end of the month, you just want us to do it as soon as we can.
End of the month? As you do always, work them into your schedule. If you think you're gonna be wicked busy at the end of the month, you can do them a little bit before, a little bit after.
Yep.
It's nothing that says you have to have them down by this date, so.
So what are we gonna do between now and then? I'm gonna say this. I am away from my house every single night right now. I have not made dinner for my family. My daughter was crying last night. So I'm just trying to think, can we think about how we're doing these meetings? And if Steve comes in on that day and we're talking about his budget, do we have enough ready? Like tonight, I don't feel like we necessarily we're fully ready. Do you have enough ready? Have we done the research so that it's useful that time and that we're moving forward? I guess that's.
The highway equipment ones and those ones are fine. Been working on them for 3 years.
Okay, so you feel comfortable, we can get that done?
Yeah, I've been working on those for 3 years. We could do the roads and bridges one in 5 minutes right
Right,
now if you really
right,
wanted to. It's not,
Okay, so you feel like we can knock out some stuff on that day? And
we could do all 3 because they're all easy.
Great.
Because I've been doing them for so long. The buildings have just,
I just think it's a
given it a
cluster.
month ago.
Right.
Some of the, like the roads and bridges, Steve has documentation for this, but we need to scan it and, put it in a PDF and link in, so.
Okay, I just
we
wanna make
were
sure
gonna
using that
continue
time
working
wisely.
on that.
Great.
For what is the, and Steve,
All right.
that's one that I didn't get updated.
Are we good?
Of your budget?
I mean,
That's what I
if
was
you
saying.
wanna do it by the same night of my
Wait, just a
budget, if you wanna do it the same night, we can. If we don't get all of them done, we just come back and do another one night and split it with somebody.
I just, for me, that'd be so much easier, because it's like, it's a whole, it's one night, it's done, and then we're done, and then the
Well,
next
it's
night's
not
free.
necessarily done.
Well,
But it
it's
would
never
give you
gonna be
from
I
done.
don't think he's gonna
from 5
get
to
through
6?
everything by an hour.
No.
Well, we're gonna be more than an hour. We're gonna be from, what if, can everyone come in at 5 o'clock on
26?
the 26th?
Yeah.
Yeah, or earlier.
Instead of 6?
Right.
Oh, wait, that's the ABC.
ABC
So
did
we
say.
just get done at 6
Oh, why don't we
instead of
do
the
5
ABC.
o'clock? We'll do
Right.
this
That's what I'm saying.
at 5 o'clock.
Right.
Till
get that-
6.
Till
And then
6.
After an hour, we're not that useful anymore,
Yeah.
right? And then that way,
We
it's
can
one
get that
whole
done.
night, I don't have to be away from
Stop.
home.
What are we trying to do?
We're trying to combine his thing into one night instead of making him come 2 different nights, Tuesday and Wednesday.
But is it gonna, transfer station, roads and bridges, and the highway department, I can see them doing in an hour, but
Yep.
town buildings,
Okay, well, let's just say
Or you
whatever he
could-
doesn't finish, we'll do it at the end of the meeting.
Yeah. Or we have, I mean, I think a lot of this stuff needs to get dealt more carefully. No, I think we should, be done, I agree. I think we can get a lot done in an hour, and then we'll know what's left, and maybe we can be very specific about what's left. I think it's so vague.
Are we still talking about the 27th?
No,
No,
26.
26.
the thing
So the
is,
27th is out, and now we're
Well,
into the
we're still
26th.
talking about it.
Yeah.
I don't think the 26th is good, because you're not gonna get an hour, because people are gonna come in for the meeting, and it's gonna interrupt, and I'd rather stick to what we had before,
Okay.
and just focus on what we need to
Do you want to
focus
at
on.
least move it up to 5?
No, then you have to get the ABC to change to 5, and you're not gonna get
No,
them all
that's
to
fine.
change
We'll
to
just,
5.
that's fine. We'll do the thing on that
Alright.
thing, that's fine.
Where are we?
Sorry, Carrie.
Well, I'll talk to you about it.
The original
later.
plan.
So we're back on the
Maybe
27th
you'll talk to me. Did
27th
we
at
decide
5.
on a date or
at
not?
5
Yeah,
PM.
the 26th,
It's Steve's
27th.
on the 27th.
the 26th at 6 and the 27th at 5.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay,
Perfect.
27th
26th
at 5, it's Steve. and it's highway equipment, and roads and bridges, and transfer station.
And town buildings, it sounds like,
And-
is what everybody wants.
And it's get those three out of the way, and then whatever's left is town buildings. Because town buildings is one of those things that, when you're talking to the fire chief, some of those pieces of town buildings are things that the fire chief has input on, like the ventilation system, questions you were asking about sprinkler system.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, that stuff we should definitely have for those town buildings need to be discussed with those departments.
yeah,
As long as we know what Steve has found as far as
what's broken.
general maintenance, right, exactly. maintenance. And
Okay.
Health and safety. Great.
We okay?
We look
Meeting
great.
adjourned.
Perfect.